you're realizing that that sensation is not just a momentary snapshot of the mind. It's how we feel when we're repressed, but it's actually something rather alive. It's much more who you are than what you thought you were when you were living in Storyland. So when I talked about openness yesterday, I was referring to this natural openness that is already the case, already here, already available, that we somehow tap into or acknowledge through intention, through sitting, through cultivating a silence in the body and the mind, and through a collective presence. All those factors play into giving us access to this quietude, this openness, this simplicity. And sometimes it doesn't take long once we sort of open that portal, once we're in contact with or in recognition of this natural openness, then anything that was hidden starts to just come into experience, into consciousness. Shadow material, shadow meaning just what we have, for whatever reason, we habitually avoid, overlook, suppress, repress. So when we open this space, when we acknowledge this openness, we're giving ourselves permission at every level to process whatever needs to be processed, to touch whatever needs to be touched. And again, this is a safe container for that. This is the best place for it. So openness itself will also show you where there could be closedness, where there could be shadow, where there could be contraction. And that might sound somewhat paradoxical, but I just want to remind everyone that we don't need to hold a rigid idea of openness either. You know, it's kind of an invitation. And once we have opened that portal, once we're in contact with that, then anything can happen. Any kind of experience can happen. An experience of deep contraction, an experience of falling deep into shadow and into a deep emotional experience. Anything can happen, and it's fine that it happens. So I just want to make a little caveat to what I was saying yesterday about openness, that anything I say, I don't want us to hold it so rigidly that we're starting to judge our own experience against an ideal. In my teaching, I don't think I have a teaching, but in my way of purveying whatever this is, I never want anyone to hold anything I say as a standard or an ideal, because all that will happen is your own mind will get a hold of that and it will be co-opted for self-judgment in one way or another. And the beauty of this unbinding is that as the unbinding clarifies and things settle, you see that what it is that you've woken up to, for lack of a better way of saying it, has no holding place. It has no inherent view. It has no specific way of being. And there's tremendous freedom in that. There's infinite degree freedom in that. But it helps to still remind ourselves sometimes that we can turn certain things into ideals, even our own experiences, even our own most profound insights. If we sort of reflect on them with our pattern-making minds, we can sort of start to solidify that without realizing it. So just be aware that that also what this is all about is freeing ourselves from any extremes, freeing ourselves from any holding places, and realizing that our bandwidth for experience is tremendous. It's vast. We can experience things. We can experience. I just don't even have words for this or language for this, but when we've really let go of these holding places and tendencies and patterns, the experiences that can appear are so far beyond description, so far beyond our ability to categorize them, that even trying to do so, it just makes no sense. And we have access to that. And again, this is a space to learn to trust yourself to access all of it. So whether there's contraction or expansion, whether there's like a sense of holding or a sense of complete and total openness, is fine here. It's fine. Just be willing to touch in a little bit more closely. Just be willing to let go a little bit more into the experience and let it be what it is. There's already a deep sort of silence of here. Probably most of you notice. Maybe I don't know, it seems pretty profound to me, and so this is the sort of crucible of transformation. This deep, profound silence, which is not negating sound. It's not a silence that is negating anything. It just permeates everything. It's really the silence of not getting in the way, not solidifying a separate self, not resisting what is, not trying to uphold any ideal, not trying to hold on to any experience or past or knowledge. So it's what's not happening that reveals this buzzing silence. Usually in retreat, within the first couple of days, I'll give some sort of talk on emotion and the shadow stuff that comes up. And we're all familiar with it to various degrees. We've all experienced intense emotions or surprising things within us coming into consciousness. Sometimes it seeps in, sometimes it explodes in, sometimes it happens with a shift, sometimes it happens during seated meditation at home, and sometimes it happens with just certain life circumstances, often with loss or disruption, loss of a job, loss of a loved one, loss of a relationship. Disruption, major disruptions in the way you thought your life was going to go, whether it's through health issues or whatever. These usual life circumstances often open us to these spaces that we often habitually avoid noticing, with often just not even consciously. So disruption is valuable in that way. But this retreat setting is maybe the best of all scenarios for really contacting that which you, without realizing it, without even choice really, habitually don't notice. It can be subtle things, it can be very gross things that you are just skirting around, but this environment tends to bring them up, brings them out, and that can be any number of things, any number of experiences. It can be emotional, can be memories coming up, can be even very organic drives becoming uncovered. All kinds of things can happen, and we're just here to explore, learn from that direct experience, learn in that direct experience, and ultimately integrate, and it all will integrate naturally. So it's not a project, it will just happen. And emotion, something along the emotion spectrum is a big part of that here in retreat. I've had every kind of emotion one can have in these spaces, in all kinds of forms of those emotions. I've had emotions that are indescribable, things I can't even talk about with words. Difficult ones, pleasant ones, emotion with resistance, emotion without much resistance. And all of those patterns will happen, and they're fine. I suppose I'll start with resistance, because resistance in one form or another is what makes this is such a challenging space, typically, why it can be so avoided, why we can live our entire lives without even addressing certain things, why it can be so surprising when we're in a retreat setting, when all this comes up. It's like, whoa, where did this all come from? Although it may not be as simple as I'm going to make it, I can kind of reduce it to the word resistance. So if we're not familiar with what this process I'm talking about, this kind of this shadow material coming into consciousness, the first time it's happened, or when it happens in a big way and we hadn't expected it, probably everyone here has been through that in one form or another. A lot of times when that happens, it's very uncomfortable, like very, very uncomfortable. And a big part of what's uncomfortable about it is that we're not able to fully process or feel the emotion. What we're feeling is a kind of emotion and resistance pattern very stuck together. And we're feeling some kind of confusion and discord in the mind often. It's like the mind doesn't know what to do with this, but it's trying to do something with it. And then there's the sneaking fear that actually it can't do anything with it. There's nothing you can do about this. There's nothing you can do to mitigate this experience. And that can cause a lot of fear, actually, until you realize you don't have to mitigate the experience. And probably the only really thorough way to know that you don't have to mitigate the experience is to go through it multiple times. More times you go through it, the more you realize you don't have to. You don't have to manage it and mitigate it. You don't have to figure out what to do about it. But again, if this is new to anyone, the mind will really struggle with this at first. Often it'll just be way up here, just going, what do I do about this? And is it this? Is it that? Am I going crazy? Like, this is just, I can't tolerate this. This is too much. Like, you'll be telling yourself the worst kind of story. And again, that's just a kind of resistance pattern that's sort of built into that mind identified superficial level of consciousness state that we live in often, until we don't. And from that state, it's a real, to breach the boundaries of that world of mind identification is like an alarm. That state doesn't like to have its boundaries breached. And so that alarm will feel like what I'm describing, that really intense discord and fear that comes up when you start to realize, okay, that's not all that's going on, right? Up here in the first levels, it's not all that's going on. It's the stuff going on in the basement, and it has been for a long time. You just haven't noticed it, right? So yeah, those alarm bells, that fear, that discord in the mind, is really just that. I guess I could call it the ego structure. It's just trying to reconstitute itself. It's just trying to stay together in the way it knows itself. But it's starting to experience that which is so far beyond it that it can't really process it, and it doesn't have to, and that's great. It's great that this is even happening. That we're showing, in one sense, we're showing that sort of ego structure that it's okay. You can have experiences that are beyond your understanding for sure, and you'll be okay. The body mind will be okay. It'll get through. So that's early on, where it's just like almost like psychologically traumatic to have a lot of repressed stuff come up into consciousness. I read an article not too long ago, and it was something along the lines of we need to talk about the dark side of meditation more, or something like meditation and mindfulness. And they were talking about people who don't realize it, but they learn a meditation, and they go into a mindfulness class, and they're trying to learn how to live life a little better or something. They don't realize that those are gateways to really starting to confront first of all, your deepest fears and these are repressed emotions, and then your identity. Like that can be really, really surprising to people, and it's psychologically stressful, right? To that state of mind identification that's really not interested in breaking its own spell on itself. And as I read the article, I had a kind of mixture of it was a strange thing to read, because I'm like, man, I had to try to put myself in the mindset of people who will start something like meditation or mindfulness, and they're like, I just want to know what to do with my life. That's why I'm doing this. And it's like, ooh, man, you're potentially open up Pandora's box. You may not be, but you may be, and then a bit of it was a little funny. Like I was almost like, should I feel guilty for thinking this is funny somehow? Because like, what did you think was going to happen? But again, everybody has different motivations on why they get into something like this. And for me, it was like just abject suffering already. It was already there. So I think what happens a lot of times is when people are really disconnected from their own suffering, and then they start to meditate and become mindful, they start to realize, oh, actually, I am suffering. The suffering's already there. The meditation didn't make you feel suffering. It's there. You've just totally unconsciously, without even trying, you've somehow avoided it. It's a very bizarre world, the world of mind identification and group complicity on that world. It's actually really fascinating. But that's not the scope of this talk. But anyway, so yeah, early on, it can be really distressing when this starts to happen. And I just say that this is going to be recorded, so anyone who may listen to it, and it may resonate with some people here, but most of us in this room have been through that and have become familiar with what's underneath that. And that is that, yeah, it still can be uncomfortable when you realize, okay, my mind is not going to get this. It doesn't have to get this. I'm not going to be able to put this in a box. I'm not going to be able to, quote unquote, get my head around this. That isn't going to happen. You also don't need to figure out what it is. You don't need to label it necessarily. It can be helpful sometimes, but you don't need to label what's going on. You don't need to decide whether it's true or false. And, for God's sake, don't try to put it into your narrative of who you think you are. Don't try to figure out how to weave it into your narrative. That's really trying to hold on tightly to thought. And it's not going to work with this, especially in a setting like this. So you learn okay, I actually just have to feel it. God forbid I have to feel this, right? Just feel it, that's what it comes down to ultimately. And where do you feel it? Well, in your body, it's down here. And so that next level of that is when we've kind of realized, okay, my mind is just going to make this into the worst kind of story. I don't have to listen to that. I don't have to listen to all the thoughts. They're just thoughts. They can come and go. It's fine, whatever. But then we drop into here, and there's this maybe a little bit more of a subtle, well, not maybe subtle, but a more fundamental level of thought, fundamental to the sense of self, the sense of a physical self. And it still has a little bit of that management quality, but it's sort of like, well, it's just like a no. It's just saying no. It's trying to run from it. And it's kind of pre-verbal, so it's a little trickier, and it can stick around a lot longer because it's easy to overlook. And even if you're not overlooking it, even if you're aware it's there, it doesn't mean it's just suddenly gone. You can still have that more fundamental to the sense of self, resistance pattern kind of interwoven with the experience of emotion. But at this point, with some maturity, meaning just experience with this, you realize, okay, it's just going to be uncomfortable. Yeah, sure, it would have been nice to have a retreat that was just blissful and peaceful the whole time, but there's some really heavy shit going on here, and that's what's here. And okay, I know I can't control it now. I can't imagine it away, that's for sure. I can't tell myself a narrative and avoid it. That just doesn't work anymore. So you kind of start to surrender and you just drop into it. It's okay, whatever's here is here. It's fine. And again, at this point, you're starting to really come into direct contact with the sensations, which is what this is. This is about sensations, about energy. Yeah. And this is a good space. Once you can kind of get to that space where you're all right, doesn't matter what I wanted to happen. Doesn't matter what I want to be here or not be here. This is what's here. It's okay. It might not feel okay, but I know it's okay. I'll get through it, and more importantly, there's something here of value. There's something here, a kind of a knowledge to be gained that's not an intellectual knowledge. It's an intuitive knowledge, and it has a voice. It has its own voice, and it's kind of a life form. It's kind of like a life form within me, That's a good place to be, and sometimes that's all you really need to do. At a retreat situation like this, everything's taken care of for you. The meals are prepared. You have your jobs and stuff, but it's pretty simple. The bell rings, you sit. The bell rings, you stand up. Go to the bathroom, get your tea. Bell rings, sit back down. Go off to sleep. You don't have anyone to talk to. You don't have to worry about, telling your story to anybody or any of it. Social media, all that stuff. It's you don't have to worry about any of it. You can just stay with this. Here it is. It's still here. Feel it. become acquainted with this part of yourself. And again, I've said it before, but I'll reiterate, this isn't new. This isn't caused by retreat, right? This feeling, this sensation, this experience, it's not caused by retreat. It's not caused by meditation or mindfulness. It's already there. You're carrying it around. And that in and of itself can be kind of surprising. It's like, how could I avoid so much? I've thought that many times looking back, like, it's like, how did I avoid so much of what I'm feeling? How did I avoid so much of what's actually going on inside? And then I see everybody else going through it and I'm like, oh, okay, that's how you do it. Like I see the mechanism. It's really, again, fascinating, but kind of tragic. But at some point it's like, okay, yeah, I don't have to put all that energy into avoiding. I don't have to put all that energy into running. I don't have to put all that energy into managing, really even into practice, right? When it comes to what we're talking about here, when this stuff comes up in a big way, there's no practice. That is the practice, right? It's here. And it's, and again, the first part is you start to realize it's okay. I'll get through it. I'm not going to go completely insane tonight. Maybe a little insane, but not all the way. I'll come back and all that insanity, all that, it's thoughts, really, all the mind just going on tilt, trying to get your attention in every way it can. Just a bunch of thoughts, and then we start to trust. We start to trust the experience. We don't like it yet. May not like it much, but we can trust it. It's okay. It's okay that it's here, and you can guide yourself into it a little deeper if you want to, through intention. Like, where am I feeling this most? Is it here? Is it here? Is it here? Where am I feeling this? Where's the sensation? You can sort of use that kind of intentionality to clarify what's actually going on. And you can clarify it further. Does it have an actual boundary? Is it demarcated by the body wall? Or is it more like a space? There's other questions you can ask. On the other side of things, you can just sort of ask for surrender. Can I surrender to this more? Can I let go into this more? And those are really the same thing. Ultimately, they have the same result. And you don't even have to do either one, because again, this is here now. You're learning a lot of things here, but one of the things you're learning is that la la land magical world of creating reality somehow with the mind, with thought, which you're not. You're rearranging reflections is all that's happening. And you're not even doing that. Habituated patterns are doing that. But feeling like that gives you this sense of volition and will and control and choice in that way. You're learning to set that aside and realize, like, oh, I don't need that illusion, because whatever's here, first of all, it's already here. You've figured that out by now. And second of all, not only is it already here, meaning I'm simply noticing it. It's actually the most interesting thing to pay attention to. It has a sort of intelligence to it, so to speak. It has value to it, deep value. And I'm kind of talking about this in different spectrums, but on another spectrum, you're starting to live much more closely to the energetics of being alive, because you're living in that sensation. You're realizing that sensation is not just a momentary snapshot of the mind. It's how we feel when we're repressed, but it's actually something rather alive. It's much more who you are than what you thought you were when you were living in Storyland. So it's like, oh, okay, wow, I'm actually investigating identity now. Yeah, and you can just sit with this. It's so beautiful. Find out how it sits. Find out how it moves. Find out how it walks. Find out how it goes to the bathroom. Find out how it eats. Find out how it walks in nature, how it sees, how it hears, right? You're starting to operate from the sensations of this body-mind. And this is your place to explore. You find out what's valuable here for you. Maybe having a conversation is valuable for you with it. What is it I can do for you? What is it you want to tell me? I'm sorry I've been avoiding you. I'm sorry I've been pushing you away. I didn't know I was doing it. I apologize. Now you have space here. You have all the time and space you need to be here. Yeah. Everybody has different inclinations, but those are potentially very valuable conversations to have internally if it feels relevant to you. And again, sometimes it's just simple sitting. It's the Zen way, just sit. It's just there. It is your Buddha nature. It is Buddha nature also. And you can even take up a sort of investigation or conversation with resistance itself. What is resistance? Is it an emotion? Is it like an emotion? Is it a thought? Is it a complex of sensations? Is it anything at all? Look and see. Give it space to be what it is. You may feel, I've had this experience in the past. It's like feeling a big emotion, big meaning it's just very prominent in the moment. Maybe sadness. Sadness can feel very big. Yeah. All encompassing, engulfing, grief, loss. You feel that and let it in, okay, you can be here. I want you to be what you are right here. You have all my attention. You have my heart. You have all the space you need to be here. Sadness. And if there's also resistance here, you can be here too. Resistance. I know you're a little sneakier. You tend to hide. That's okay. I want to know how you move. I want to understand you. I want to know how you stay alive. What is your defense mechanism? What is your self-protection? What is your message? What are you trying to show me? What are you trying to help me with? In fact, resistance, although it seems to cause us a lot of trouble, perhaps, or we might perceive it that way, it can actually teach us a lot about subtlety, because it's a very subtle experience. It's a very subtle energetic resistance. It's subtle, and it has this kind of, I'm really personifying it a lot now, but it's really has this kind of ancient wisdom, very intelligent. It knows you very well. It knows the psyche very, very well. And it's kind of an animating force as well. It's kind of like what happens when the animating force meets human consciousness. Yeah, and it's very old, very ancient, and has a story to tell, just like any energy, potentially, has a life force to it. And I think the number one advice I have for working with resistance is don't add resistance to it. Don't make it wrong. Check in with yourself, whatever you think you are at this moment. Check in with yourself. What is your opinion of resistance? Are you pissed off at it? Are you mad at it because it seemed to ruin certain things in your life? Are you mad at it because maybe it seemed to ruin a relationship or something? I don't know. Just check in. What is your predisposition toward resistance? Is it problematic? And then be okay with that. Say, oh, that's okay. Yeah, I can see why I was blaming this resistance pattern for a sabotaged relationship or life situation. At the same time, who knows what would have happened if that continued? Maybe it would have been worse. Maybe resistance actually did me a big favor there. I don't really know. Yeah. So, yeah, when you start to unload your own judgments, really about anything, but in this case about resistance, it opens up a much more enjoyable space to work in, to be in, to process in, to inquire within. And if you can make friends with resistance, what a challenge, right? But if you can have a regard for resistance, share space, share energetic space with it, feel what it feels like to be here. Resistance. What forms can it take? How does it move? And set aside all of your beliefs, your preconceived beliefs about it, if you can, just all of them, just as an experiment. This is really good with any emotion, by the way. Set aside all of your preconceived ideas about the emotion and let it show you what it is. Come completely unguarded and feel it fully. And then again, like, you can talk to it, ask it, what is it you need? What is it you want to show me or tell me? What is your origin story? Some of this may, lead to something. Some of it may not really, but it's good to have that intentional openness toward anything. And by the way, one of the priorities even the ego has is to have good relationships, right? If you want to have good relationships with people, have a good relationship with yourself, with your emotions. Have good relationship with everything that comes through you, moves through you, and the rest will be easy, or much easier for sure. The reason I noticed this, I don't know, several years ago, but it just became more and more obvious as I noticed it, that when I interact with people, it started becoming really obvious. I'm always interacting with two people. There's like the public image person, like the persona, right? Acquaintances, friends that aren't real close maybe, or something, or just whatever. And there's people that are like emotionally connected. And when people are emotionally connected, it's like a whole different person comes online, like a whole different set of fears and triggers and beliefs and intentions. And it's almost like a whole different personality. And everybody's like that. Like it's really fascinating. But this is also why we can be duped in a relationship. Even, we can see the persona, enjoy that part of somebody, and then when we get really close, it's like, whoa, who is that person? You may be saying that about yourself too. Who am I in this? What just happened? But I think largely that's when we haven't explored deeply within ourselves. If we've explored deeply within ourselves, we'll pick up much more subtle cues with everyone all the time, actually. And we'll be okay with it, and we'll be accepting of it. At the same time, we'll often have better boundaries about it, practical boundaries, because we kind of can feel into what's actually happening underneath the hood, because we've done it with ourselves. And this never ends. I think this kind of work never really ends. It just gets subtler and subtler, and it gets more automatic and simple and spontaneous and enjoyable. But it's just another reason that it is valuable to spend a week not talking to family members or talking to anybody, and spending time in your own energetics and your own emotional space and your own collection of beliefs and intentions, and all of it. It pays huge benefits in the relative world, of course. But the funny thing there is, often when we're the most, dynamic in relationships, meaning like there's the most drama and pushing and pulling and sabotaging, when there's most of that happening, it's when we're not focused inward at all and we're very focused outward. And so we're kind of unsettled whether we're in relationship, closely, not, but it doesn't matter. Like, even if you're in a relationship with somebody who's maybe very healthy or healthier than you are, you still don't feel settled. So what's that about, right? On the other hand, if you just take some time to like look inward, turn inward, and do the inner work, then you kind of feel settled whether you're in relationship, not in relationship, you're alone, you're with somebody. That's equanimity, and that's available to everyone. And that deep equanimity comes through this kind of work, for sure. Looking into reactivity, resistance, emotion, avoidance of emotion, distortion of emotion, control, blame, all of it. Which leads me to talking about blame specifically. Blame is an interesting one because it's one of those ones that's very easy to overlook, and we can be full of blame. We can have a lot of blame going on inside and outside. It can be easy to overlook it. It can be really challenging to like feel it and to confront it, confront the fact that we're experiencing it and we're utilizing it. At first, especially, it's like it can be a really hot experience, like jealousy or something like that. But if you make a study of it and you really learn how it's functioning, and just first of all accept that, oh, okay, I'm blaming now. This blame is here now. that can really unload a lot of polarity in your life. And then at some point you can kind of get free of it altogether, or essentially altogether. And then it leads to such a peaceful inner experience. If you don't do anything else, that really does. But again, it's pretty deeply wound within a lot of us. So it does take a bit of work. Blame, yes, I don't know if it's an emotion or not. It's more of a reaction to emotion usually. A reaction to jealousy, a reaction to fear of abandonment, things like that. But it tends to shoot us up into our mind and justify and tell stories to ourselves and others. If you just like notice it, oh, blame is here. Okay, I want to tell a story about how that person did me wrong, or why this person's making me feel this way, or whatever it is, right? If we can just stop for a moment and reverse it and go, well, wait a minute. What does it feel like to feel blame right now? Probably feels a little hot, a little restless, but can I feel it? Can I experience it right now? Yeah. Can I sit with it for a while? Sure. Yeah. And again, like resistance, you can sort of befriend it, understand it in a different way. Why are you here? What do you want to say? What do you want to tell me? What do you want to tell the world? What do you want to make happen? Some of that can be helpful. And again, just where do you feel it? Where do I feel this? And what is the associated emotion? So associations here is helpful as well. Exploring associations is helpful. So if I'm feeling an emotion and I'm feeling resistance, what is the association? Where's the resistance? Where's the emotion? Do they have different voices? Are they opposed to one another, or is one protecting the other? All of this can be explored. And while all of this is unfolding, however it's unfolding for you, I really encourage people to don't forget about the basics. Even in deeper realization, it can be very helpful to remind yourself periodically, like to just ask the question, especially in very intense experiences that maybe they're not even necessarily emotional, they're more energetic and intense existential experiences. But still always check in and say, okay, what is the mind saying right now? What are the thoughts? What are the thoughts that are sneaking into this? And often there are things like, I can't handle this, or this will kill me. This will destroy me. And in those spaces, it can be hugely helpful just to say, okay, that's the thought. The thought is, I can't handle this. What if I just set that thought aside for a moment and just come right back to the experience? You don't even have to solve it. Like, can I handle it? Can I not handle it? Just set it aside for a moment. That filter, because it's a filter. Set the filter aside and just see what the experience is. And maybe it probably often will be indescribable. Sometimes that's all the mind's trying to do. It's just trying to describe something that can't be described and getting very frustrated because it can't do it. So it interprets it as catastrophization, right? It's like, this is going to kill me. It's not going to kill you not to know something. It's not going to kill you to experience expansion that is just completely beyond the body mind. It won't, but the mind will not understand that. So check in with it periodically and see if there's any little pebbles in your shoe of thought saying, I can't handle this. This is too much. You may even get like a flash of like a childhood fear or something like that. You may not, but it's good to check in and not forget that even in deeper realization, subtle thoughts sneaking in can be rather distorting experientially. And they can be very releasing to just set it aside. Just realize like there is a primary experience here that is really not contingent upon that thought. Whether that thought's here or not, this experience is still what it is. So can I just set the thought aside for a moment and just this. And spending a month in silence is a really good time to practice that. Because the mind will become calm, much more calm. It already is after a day. By the end of this week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, your mind's going to be much, much more calm. The whole body mind will be much more calm. So then you have access to the more subtle, more fundamental thoughts, the thoughts about existence and protection of the self, that are even then just thoughts, but they're very fundamental thoughts. And they're sort of more deeply woven, I think, into our patterns of sensation and so forth. And I've said sort of a lot of different things here, but just as a simple takeaway, if you're in an intense experience in retreat or whatever, don't know what to do, feeling just sort of out of sorts, lay down or take a walk and just open up your aperture of sensation to the entire body, however you can. Sort of just take in the entirety of the body sensations. And then just feel it. Just feel it. And if the mind starts getting really loud, just give it some attention. Tell it, it's okay. I understand you have a lot to say here. It's fine. We can be in the mind space. But just keep that aperture open. The openness. In that space of thought, consciousness, it'll settle. If it needs to be a raging storm like we came through last night for a while, that's fine. Let it be a raging storm. Let it be hail and thunder and lightning. It's okay. Just be the entirety of the sky for it. Give it that container. And then the mind will calm, it'll settle at some point. It doesn't have to, but it will. And we just slide attention back down into the body. Just feel it's here. And a lot of work is done that way, but you won't notice it. You won't see it happening. You won't really feel it happening. You won't be able to track it or process it, but a lot of work is just happening behind the scenes. It is really energetic. This is all energetic. So, that's kind of a default that you can use if you really just don't know what else to do. But that open aperture of experience, meaning like, make sure you're feeling your feet, your legs, your chest, your gut, arms, shoulders, hands, head, front of the head, back of the head, your throat. Make sure it's all being, considered, and just stay with it. And if you get too ungrounded, then notice your contact points, where your hands are touching surfaces, where your feet are touching surfaces, where your body's laying down on the bed touching a surface. Or if you need to go outside, put your feet on the ground. Just put your attention in those contact points. Those sensation points can be very grounding.